Hello comic fans, here's Earl Grey. In the last video I did an overview about my favorite comic publishers. Today I want to continue this list thing with my favorite authors. I mean, this is highly subjective, even if my opinion changes from day to day, but for this day these will be my top 10 authors. So, I have three honorable mentions. That will be Greg, Benoit Peters, and of course René Goscinny. Three great European comic writers. But somehow I have to take cuts and look for the authors that excited me the most in the last couple of years. And one of them is clearly Rick Remender, my rank 10 here. I picked Black Science, fantastically drawn by Matteo Scalera. Rick Remender is one of these writers who picks his artists just perfectly. I mean, you have to have an illustration like these to sell us a crazy story like Black Science or Fear Agent. And it really helps when they come in these beautiful packages. The Black Science thing here is by Image, but it has, well, pretty much the same size as these fantastic Dark Horse Library editions. This was the first story that I've read by Rick Remender, and I was fascinated by it, and most probably because it was my first story by him. It is still my favorite. He has some kind of tropes. The father thinking about his duties in life and how he failed and so on, and this can be sometimes a bit repetitive when you read too much Rick Remender, but otherwise, hey, come on, Deadly Class, wonderful thing. Waiting for the fourth and I think concluding volume of these beautiful books here. Another example why it's really actually to be rewarding. It's rewarding to be a trade waiter. And on rank 9, we have Monsieur Wilfried Lupano. He is considered by many, and by yours truly as well, as the true grandchild of René Goscinny. Maybe it's a bit unfair not to include René Goscinny, but him. But I've read his stuff more recently. It's been a while since I read my last Asterix or so. Die alten Knacker in German, or The Old Geezers, or Les Vieux Fourneaux. In the original, it's a group of old guys who fight against the rest of the world. So it's maybe not so different actually in this way from Asterix, but it's a political satire. It's real, it's funny, it's heartbreaking at times, but for the most part it's really funny and uplifting, and just a great series with believable characters. This is more kind of a chaotic fantasy story, Azimut. Don't know about an English publication. To be honest with you, I really have to come to terms with this story here, but the art is great and lots of crazy ideas. And this one here, The Murder She Deserved, or She Deserves, despite of the bit inconsistent artwork. The artwork is not bad at all, but it changes through the story. But it is held together by this fantastic story by Monsieur Lupano, about an innocent young man seduced by the money of some dandy, degenerate bohemian, if you will, perfectly capturing the world around the 1900. On rank 8 I have that guy Ed, Ed Brubaker, that is. I can't speak about his contributions to the superhero world, of course. But I love the works that he did together with his partner in crime, Sean Phillips. 3 more or less random picks here. I love the Fatale, Fade Out, and Follow Me Down, but of course there's so much more. First and foremost, Criminal, of course. Yeah, I mean, obviously that guy has to be included here. Without his stories, the pretty amazing art by Sean Phillips would add to nothing. I mean, the stories are really, really important, the characters that they craft together. Now to rank 7, Brian K. Vaughan. By the way, there will be at least 2 follow-ups to this video here. First one with my favorite cartoonists who draw from scripts by others, so maybe Sean Phillips will be in there. And then there will be a separate video with artists that write their own stuff, and they won't be included in this video here. So, and that's more the European tradition, and maybe the reason why I include here a lot of American writers. Amongst them, Brian K. Vaughan, and here's one big thing missing. I mean, we have The Last Man, Why the Last Man, Paper Girls, and Ex Machina. And you can win the golden tea bag of excellence if you know about that pretty unknown series that I don't hold here in my hands. Yeah, fun guy, fun stories, crazy concepts. I mean, if he would have done even more comics or series, he would rank higher in my top 10 here for sure. But there are some other guys like Garth Ennis that you can't ignore as well, and Garth Ennis is on my rank 6 here. Hitman, drawn by John McCrea. It's he has this fun style which matches perfectly, I think, with Garth Ennis' crazy ideas. He's brutal, he's irreverent, he's he's provoking. I mean, this book here, I haven't read this, the Collected Chronicles of Wormwood, but it was recommended to me by some fellow German YouTuber, so I'm pretty sure that this will be a surefire hit. And again, which series isn't included here in these 3? I mean, there are a lot of, for instance, the Punisher series by Garth Ennis, which is excellent, almost every arc that he wrote. But of course, I'm talking about The Preacher, in case you didn't know, and The Preacher alone is worth your entry in every top 10 in the world. Rank 5 brings us back to Europe with Pierre Christin. This is one of the examples of the political comics he did together with the amazing Enki Bilal. Hunting Party is set in Eastern Europe, sometimes in the era of the Cold War, and unfortunately it's today more believable than ever, even though, or because it's a biting satire. This is Detektiv Hardy. He created together with the amazing Annie Götzinger Ohleit. She had an incredible style, and I love everything that she drew. She has a very own style of ligne claire, and these are very interesting, intelligent crime stories within certain time frame and highly recommended. In Germany, collected in 2 hardbacks in a slipcase, and wonderful stuff. His magnum opus, Pierre Christine's magnum opus, certainly is Valerian and Veronique in German. The original title is Valerian et Laureline, and Laureline, or a Laureline, Laureline. I never cared too much for the art of Jean-Claude Mézières, even though it's a perfect match for this kind of time travel sci-fi story. You don't have to, you can't judge this story here, this comic, by just 1 album or 2. It's really one of these cases where you have to read the whole stuff to really cherish the complexity, the ideas of Monsieur Pierre Christin. And that's Jean-Claude Mézières, and if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Evelyne Tranlé. She's the colorist of the whole story. Amazing sci-fi story, real story. If you open it up and you see just the cartoony characters, you maybe won't feel it, but read it and then you will be amazed. Now to one guy. Yeah, I haven't, it's one example here in which I haven't included the big elephant in the room, which is of course the Sandman here, but picked up 3 other series by him. Nordische Mythen und Sagen, Northern Myths and Legends, or how the English title is. I guess this is one of his most recent publications, even though the comic adaptation is more due, I guess, to P. Craig Russell. He did the script and layouts, and the original stories were by Monsieur Neil Gaiman, even though it's just a recollection of these myths, but very interesting, very fun and entertaining. Probably the first book that I've read by Neil Gaiman was the last movie, or how this, the original title is. Signal to Noise. Signal to Noise is the original title. With art by Dave McKean. And Dave McKean does what he does here. Always do these collage things here, mixing all kind of materials to some very coherent, very gripping, very emotional, very thoughtful story. And the interesting thing is that this grabbed me instantly when I read it when I was 20 or something. It's about the end of your life, and usually you don't tend to read stuff like this in this time frame in your life. Actually, I didn't do it. But I got the emotions, I got the grief, I got the whole impact of the story. It's just a testimony of his writing skills. And of course here the Neil Gaiman library by Dark Horse, wonderful books collecting his short stories in this oversized format, especially when you have this roster of artists that work for Neil Gaiman stories. Very different stories in each volume, and each of the story with lots of back material here, and each of the stories just showcasing the amount of thoughtfulness and the special voice of Neil Gaiman, this laconic Neil Gaiman voice that I love very much. Speaking of a certain voice, I mean, we have this weird, crazy magician called Alan Moore, and I mean, come on, there are so much books that I could put here on my table. The Sandman, V for Vendetta, Watchmen, and so on and so forth. I picked here my first encounter. Really, the English title is Small Killings. The German title Die leisen Tode des Timothy Hole, or Holy, with art by the Argentinian Oscar Zarate, and the art is great, the story is great, it's very deep, and yeah, I can't summarize it here in 2 words. One of the best and most unknown works by Alan Moore. I saw it recently popping up here and there in different videos, so it seems to gain the popularity, the fame that this work here especially deserves. Providence, I picked this here just as a reminder that this is from or by Alan Moore as well. I'm not the biggest fan of the big text parts here that showcase somehow that Alan Moore is not always fine with the medium. He is a bit snobbish in a way. And the art here is not the best in the world, but Providence, nevertheless, one of the great Lovecraft adaptations, mostly due to the fantastic writing of Alan Moore. And I think I've mentioned that he is some kind of a self-made magician here, and this shows big time in Promethea, with art by J.H. Williams III. The book 1 here is of these absolute editions, is or absolute style edition, yeah, it's called Absolute Promethea, is totally out of print and you can't get it anywhere. So I bought the trade paperbacks for the first part of the story here to get the gist of, or to get the story, to understand it. I look at the art, but it's not only the art, it's the crazy mind behind it. And even though I can't care, to be honest, not really much about stories with that are driven by magic ideas of magic, and usually this is really a no-go for me. But in this work here, in this story, it really works, and it's not a story that you will understand the first time. At least I didn't, and I have to flip back and forth and to find my way through it. But very rewarding, great stuff. On rank 2, Jean Van Am. Maybe, or for real, the most prolific writer in European comics. There's Largo Winch and tons of others, Lady S, action-oriented comics that are usually his thing, like his masterpiece 13, collected in these beautiful editions here, drawn for the most part, at least the first part of the whole saga, by William Barnes. There's a bit there's an album drawn by Möbius, aka Jean Giraud, within that saga. Espionage, crime, yeah, conspiracy tale that will keep you really entertained and thrilled in the true sense of the word. Then we have Torgal, the best Viking saga ever, with a bit of infusion of sci-fi and yeah, northern myths, and the gods play their role in some parts of the story. For the most part, it's a family saga about these people here, and it really helps that this comic here was drawn, at least for the most part of the run, by one of my favorite artists, the Polish Gregor Roginski. Like this thing here, the big power, or however, of the little Schninkel This is a wonderful satire, obviously, on the Old Testament. So it's a parody of religion and taking parts of the 2001 movie to making his very own, very strange sci-fi tale around this little dude Schninkel, who happens to be the new Jesus, and spiced with this perfect, wonderful art by Roginski. And it's concluded after this album. If you never have heard of Roginski or Jean Van Hamme, my second favorite writer as of this day here, pick up the English translation or French original, or in which language you can get your greedy fingers on where does this sentence end? I don't know, but maybe we should come to number 1. And come on, you see Doom Patrol, you already know who I want to showcase here. Grant Morrison, the other great wizard, the crazy magician, who, and this maybe is a bit different from Alan Moore, who never betrays or looks down on comicdom, but embraces it with a full heart. If he does the new Green Lantern, or the almost recent Green Lantern run, which is fantastic, at least as far as I've read it. I read, I have it in single issues, the Green Lantern run, and I read just to a certain point in the story and think, hey, that's so great, let's read it again. So I read, I guess, the first comic books thrice, and still not through with the run. It's just a delight. Maybe my favorite, one of my favorite comic runs of all time is the Grant Morrison Doom Patrol. Despite the pretty generic art by Richard Case for the most part, which doesn't always deliver what the crazy mind of Grant Morrison obviously had in his head, but it still comes across, because Grant Morrison cares a lot about his stories, and think about The Invisibles or Animal Man, all stuff that I could show here, or the great Batman run. Talking about Batman, my first encounter with a real Bat story was in a library. And of course, of all the Bat stories, I read Arkham Asylum and was blown away. And maybe this was a huge part that made me the great comic fan I am today. I mean, I had my kids' comics back in the day, like Lucky Luke or Asterix, which are actually not only for kids, of course, but for adults as well, for everyone. But I had this phase in my life, and then late teenager, I don't know how old I was, this ignited here my love for comics again on a whole other level. Arkham Asylum, and probably his first really big contribution to the comic world was Zenith, a superhero tale he did actually for 2000 AD. He was part of the UK invasion, or however it is called. All the talent that went from the island to the US with their works, as it was the Scotsman Garth Ennis or Alan Moore, of course. So, yeah, Grant Morrison, fantastic writer. Actually, the sequence of all the writers that I showed you here changed a lot since I began thinking about this video here, about this top 10. In fact, the first number one I picked, I thought this is a no-brainer, was Brian K. Vaughan, because this is just the guy who's in everybody's mind today with the continuation of Saga, and rightfully so. He would be a deserved number one. But then all the other writers come to my mind, and I have to balance it out. And of course, Grant Morrison is he's a really deserved winner in this little competition here. And I will continue it with my favorite artists. I will do a video about my favorite artists and a video about my favorite artists that not only draw from scripts from other people, but do their own writing. So I would like to differentiate these two groups here. Artists that draw after scripts and artists that do their own scripts. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.